There's a strange contradiction in the human heart. The moment you begin to care deeply, something inside you pulls back. Not because the feeling is unwelcome, but because it feels dangerous. You've met someone who makes you feel seen, who listens in a way that unravels you. And just as warmth begins to settle in your chest, you find yourself creating distance, canceling plans, keeping texts brief, building walls out of silence. From the outside, it looks like indifference, but inside, it's the opposite. You're withdrawing precisely because you care too much. This pattern has a psychology, a quiet logic that makes sense only when you look beneath the surface. Because people who retreat when closeness arrives aren't cold or unfeeling. They're protecting something fragile, something that learned long ago that vulnerability comes with a cost. If this perspective resonates, you can support the video by liking it. It often begins in childhood, not with dramatic trauma, but with small moments that taught the nervous system to brace for pain. A parent who was inconsistent, affection one day, distance the next. A caregiver who praised achievements but ignored emotions. Or perhaps a home where love felt conditional, where being needed meant being safe, but needing meant being a burden. The child learns a dangerous equation. Closeness equals uncertainty, and uncertainty equals danger. So the mind develops a strategy. Stay at arm's length. Don't let anyone get close enough to leave a mark. Psychologists call this avoidant attachment, a pattern where intimacy triggers not warmth, but alarm. The nervous system, shaped by early experiences, begins to associate closeness with abandonment, not consciously. The child doesn't think these thoughts, but the body remembers, the heart learns. And years later, the adult carries those lessons forward, still bracing for the blow that never came, but always felt inevitable. You see it in the way they move through relationships. They're present until presence becomes too real. They're affectionate until affection demands reciprocity. They engage until engagement asks them to stay. And then, without warning, they retreat. Not because they stopped caring, but because they started caring enough to be afraid. Comment, withdraw, if this describes your experience. There's a specific moment when the shift happens. It's not always visible. Sometimes it's just a feeling, a tightness in the chest when someone texts too often, a discomfort when someone remembers small details, a sudden urge to create space when someone says they miss you. The mind interprets these gestures not as affection, but as dependency. And dependency feels like a trap, because somewhere deep inside there's a belief that once someone needs you, leaving becomes inevitable. So you leave first, not dramatically, just quietly, pulling back before the attachment can deepen, before the loss can hurt. Neuroscience explains part of this. The brain's amygdala, the fear center, becomes hyperactive in people with avoidant patterns. When intimacy increases, the amygdala signals threat. The body responds as if danger is near. Heart rate increases. Muscles tense. The mind searches for escape routes. It's not a choice. It's a reflex. A survival mechanism that once protected a child now sabotages the adult. But beneath the biology lies something deeper. A story the person tells themselves. I don't need anyone. I'm fine alone. People always leave anyway. These aren't just thoughts. They're shields. Armor built from old wounds. And the more someone cares, the thicker the armor becomes. Because caring means risk. And risk means the possibility of repeating the past. Type YES if this helped you understand something about yourself. The very people who withdraw often crave connection the most. They're not indifferent, they're exhausted. Exhausted from years of managing closeness like a minefield. From learning to love with one foot already out the door. They want to trust, they want to let someone in. But every time they try, the old programming kicks in. The voice that says, better to be alone than to be left. Better to feel nothing than to feel everything and lose it. So they create tests, unconscious ones. They pull back to see if you'll chase. They go silent to see if you'll notice. They build distance to see if you'll bridge it. Not because they want to manipulate, but because they need proof. Proof that you won't vanish the moment they lower their guard. Proof that caring won't end in abandonment. But here's the tragedy. The more they test, the more exhausted the other person becomes. And eventually, the person does leave. Not because they didn't care, but because loving someone who keeps running feels like chasing a ghost. And so the cycle repeats. The withdrawal confirms the fear. The fear justifies the withdrawal. And the person remains convinced that they were right all along. People always leave. If someone you know might benefit from this, feel free to share it. Yet understanding this pattern doesn't immediately break it. Awareness helps, but it's not a cure, because the nervous system doesn't respond to logic. It responds to repetition, to new experiences that slowly rewire old beliefs. Healing requires something uncomfortable. Staying when every instinct says to run. Feeling the fear of closeness without acting on it. Letting someone care without sabotaging it. This is where the real work begins. Not in the mind, but in the body. In the moments when the chest tightens and the urge to disappear rises, that's when you pause. You breathe. You notice the fear without obeying it. You practice presence, even when presence feels unsafe. Therapists call this earned, secure attachment, the process of relearning what safety feels like. It's not dramatic, it's small, responding to a text even when you want to hide, sharing a feeling even when it makes you vulnerable, staying in a conversation even when silence feels easier. Each small act rewrites the script. Each moment of staying builds a new pathway in the brain, one that says closeness doesn't always end in pain. If this gave you clarity, comment safe below. But there's also a quiet truth here. Not everyone is ready for that work, and that's okay. Sometimes withdrawal is protection, a necessary boundary when the world has been too harsh. There's no shame in needing space, no weakness in choosing solitude over chaos. The difference lies in awareness. Are you withdrawing to protect yourself, or are you withdrawing to protect an old story? Are you creating space because you need it, or because you're afraid of what might happen if you stay? These questions don't have easy answers, but they're worth asking. Because people who withdraw when they care aren't broken, they're careful. They've learned that love can hurt, and they've decided that distance is safer than disappointment. But somewhere inside, beneath the walls and the silence and the careful distance, there's still a part that hopes, that wonders what it might feel like to stay, to let someone see the truth, to risk being known without running. And maybe that's the real transformation. Not becoming fearless, but becoming willing. Willing to feel the fear and let someone hold it with you. Willing to believe that not every hand reaching out will eventually let go. Willing to discover that the person who stayed through your withdrawal might be the one who finally makes staying feel safe. The heart that pulls away doesn't need to be forced open. It needs to be met with patience, with consistency, with the kind of love that doesn't chase but doesn't abandon either. The kind that says, I see you retreating and I'm still here. Because sometimes the bravest thing someone can do is not to stop caring, but to care enough to let someone care back. If this resonated with you, like the video. What pattern do you recognize in yourself when closeness begins to feel too real? And if you want to explore more about the hidden patterns that shape how we connect, subscribe to this channel. We go beneath the surface, into the psychology that moves us when we're not looking. You don't have to stay afraid forever. You just have to stay long enough to discover that some people mean it when they say they not leaving.